So tonight we're going to talk about how you can make a judgment about where you're at in the process of this transition from 3D to 4D. But before we do that, I want to spend a few minutes talking about what happened in Las Vegas. So a couple of weeks ago when we had the hurricane, I spoke about mass events. So how do you handle something like this? What is the, how can you get control of your emotions and try and put this in perspective as the observer while still feeling great love and compassion for the people that are involved? So the first thing that Reba and I did was we sat down in our launching pad, we sat down in our spiritual room and got out a clipboard and a piece of paper, and we made a list of things that could be positive about Las Vegas. So for instance, people open their heart to other people. And I'm going to have an example of that in a minute. And it's a huge event, creating care and compassion. It's also something that causes us to question, ask endless questions, question everything. And really, that's a really very important purpose, because during this time of transition, the only way we're going to be able to navigate the transition successfully is to ask these questions and to come to our own understanding of how we want to live our lives. What are our values and what do we want to do? And if we create our own reality, I am creating an unsafe world because I'm in it. Is that the case? So there's sort of a long list of questions that this creates in us and creates confusion, upset, and concern. For me personally, it was a very, very transformative event. And I was mentioning before the group started tonight that I began to cry. I don't pay any attention to the news. We don't get a newspaper. We don't have a TV. So it was a long time after it happened that Reba started to inform me about it. I saw something on Twitter about Las Vegas, but that was it. I didn't read anything because lots of stuff happened, so what's the point in reading it? But then she started to explain it to me, and I started feeling extremely powerful emotion. So powerful that I began to cry, and after a short period of time, I realized that the way I related to these events in the past was a pale comparison to the depth and level of emotion that I was having at this particular time with this particular event. And it made me reevaluate the past. It made me realize, feel far more emotion and appreciation about the past than I ever had before. So it didn't just change me with this event, but it changed me with the other events as well. And then in the morning when we were doing our spiritual practices, Reba asked me to look something up, which I did, and I pulled out the folder, and here was a presentation that I did, The Nature of Mass Events, Orlando, in June of 2016, when they had the nightclub shooting with 38 people that died. So how powerful was this event? And what was the impact on us? What was the impact on people? So I'm going to go to the end of the presentation and read this example. So let's end with this. There was a grandmother going to her grandson's funeral. Her grandson who had been killed in the incident. She got on the JetBlue plane, and the stewardess thought it would be a nice gesture if people on the plane expressed their condolences to her. So she started a piece of paper in the back of the plane so people could sign their name during this 1.5-hour flight. The trouble was, people did not just sign their name, and a few words, they wrote paragraphs. So she started a paper at the front of the plane. At the end, she had to start handing out individual pieces of paper to people to express their love, their feelings, and their condolences. And as they left, every person on that plane hugged the grandmother and shared their love and tears. So this event was powerful beyond speaking, transformative of our whole reality beyond speaking. Just to take one small step back to the beginning, when we were in all that is, billions of years ago, over 200 million life experiences ago, in both this reality and countless others, we made decisions about how we wanted to live those lives. And did we want our life to be a catalyst for love? And there was a memorial service in Orlando, and a participant was taking pictures, and she looked up in a tree and saw a large group of birds. She was surprised and turned the camera and took a picture. She counted the birds several times and was shocked that the number of birds exactly matched the number of souls that passed in this incident. Birds are symbolic of spirit. The spirit of each of those who died was symbolically there, both in physical reality and, of course, eternally with us in non-physical reality. So these very powerful events can lead us to much greater compassion. They can lead us to a sense of oneness. That's a comment that came from people over and over again after 9/11, how they felt a sense of closeness to people in New York City. And in fact, that's where meetup.com got started, so that people could find ways to connect with each other and find their experiences and share their experiences. So these are not random acts of violence. These are, let me put it in the deepest possible way. When you go into heaven, you don't drive in your Cadillac. They don't move your big house up there. All that goes in is you. And all that anybody else takes in is themselves. And the point is that the only thing that matters are relationships. Everything else is just a prop in a play in which we get to experience relationships. And I'll just emphasize this point a little bit more. Let's say that you had everything you wanted. Let's say you had all the money you wanted, the house you wanted, the car you wanted, you lived where you wanted. Just take a few minutes to imagine that and then take away all the people. It feels really hollow, doesn't it? Because it is really hollow. They're just props. So the thing that we very often think that if I get the car, if I get the house, if I get the money, if I get whatever it might be, my life is going to change dramatically. And maybe it will for the afternoon, or for 15 minutes, or for the length of time it takes you to consider, wow, now I've got to take care of this. And I'm not going to park close to anybody else because, I've got this incredibly expensive car. I've got to park 2 miles down the street so nobody gets close to it. And then, of course, your oil change costs $1,000. Well, no, they usually cost around $3,000 for an oil change. And if you get your brakes done, it's $20,000. So it's, having stuff sort of sucks your life away because you've got to take care of your stuff. Now, Reba and I are in a really good position because we don't have a lot of stuff, thank goodness. And that's by intention. I had a really big house. I had an army of people that took care of it. And so it was between my house and Reba's little Florida cottage, and I didn't even hesitate. I sold my house and moved to the cottage. And that army of people went away because we rent. Hallelujah. Just pick up the phone and call the landlord, who lives on the property. So, he's a stone's throw away. They're really nice. So from my perspective, I'm a few steps closer to heaven than I was when we would literally have 40 or 50 people that took care of my house. I am not exaggerating.
Wow.
During the course of a year. So today we're going to talk about this transition from 3D to 4D. Seth was constantly focused on this because this is what it's all about. What are we doing with ourselves to put us in alignment with this spectacular opportunity we have? So specifically, he went over triggers. So one trigger would be owning that you create your own reality. Another trigger is that you affirm your godhood. Another trigger is that you affirm your multidimensionality and try to experience it. And do you happen to remember the fourth trigger, dear? Let's see.
Did we say on your God?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were they again?
Affirmation, create our own reality, multidimensionality, and, well, I've talked about it here several times, so.
So just remember it. I can't.
Refer to your notes.
Past
Obviously,
lives.
you're taught in college.
No, it wasn't past lives, although that's going to be one of the characteristics of fourth and fifth density. So let's talk about the transition. So the transition started in 2012, and we're all familiar with it. December 21st, 2012 started the transition. The transition in time is about 18 years. The transition from fourth density to fifth density is about 18 months. So 18 years versus 18 months. And if you were to transition from fifth to sixth density, it would take you 18 days. So you can see the huge disparity. Now, and when we complete this transition, we're going to go right to fifth density. We're not going to even stop. It's just going to be a continuous transition. Because when you get to 5D, to fifth density, all other realities exist within the fifth density. They're all there. So, with that, what I'm going to do is go over some characteristics of third, fourth, and fifth density, and go over some examples, and hopefully you get your input, and we'll discuss them. And the purpose of this is to get a sense of where you're at in the process. Now, before we start this, it's going to seem like a long list, and you're probably going to go, am I doing that? Am I doing that? Am I doing that? Look, the thing you want to do every morning when you get up is say to yourself, I want to live in the new earth. That's my intention. And the ticket in is simple. Can I find a way today to love more? So I'm going to go over a long list of things here. But if you're getting up in the morning and you're saying, can I find a way today to love more? That's the secret. That's the starting place. So in third density, we have personality self and unawareness of a higher self. Now, for people like us, that seems ridiculous because we are very aware. But there are plenty of people that are atheists or people that are skeptics or agnostics. And for them, the higher self is a big question mark, much less living there. In fourth density, it's going to be a transition. It's 18 years. So you could actually draw a line somewhere in this process and say, this is the beginning, and then there's a crossover point where you go far deeper, far faster into fourth density and live from that particular place.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure, please, Paul.
So you're saying it takes, is that 18 years on an individual basis, like from the point where somebody starts the journey to fourth density
Oh, thank you, dear.
until they get there, is 18 years, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so this is a brilliant question, and this is the way it works. It's only emblematic. It's only a symbol. So for instance, every person is literally on their own path. In 18 years, at that starting point of where the vibration of the world was that you lived in at that time, moving forward through this transformational process, which is a huge increase in the energy in this reality, it would take 18 years. And that was based on the premise that you didn't do a lot, but you went through a lot of experiences that transformed you. Now, if you're on the fast track, and if you're coming to NBOC, you are really on the fast track. Because you realize that everything in this reality is talking to you. You realize that this is a golden opportunity to be still and to know yourself. And as you do that, you will dramatically accelerate that process. So that one person might be 18 years and you might be 4 years or 6 years. I mean, we're 5 years into the process now, so it's unlikely that you've done it faster than that, or you'd be sitting here as an enlightened being.
No, but I'll tell you, I would say that my journey began with the movie The Secret, which I probably saw 15-something years ago.
Wow. Yeah. So, from the perspective of non-physical, they've been laying the groundwork forever. And sort of softening up the ground, and the whole reality has had experiences. If you look at the media, look at the number of times the media has talked about, whether in books or in movies, say, contact with aliens. So at some point in this transition process, that's going to happen. When, I don't know, but it will happen. And when it does happen, it's not going to be a radically new idea to anybody, because we've been permeated, our reality has been permeated with media that's talked about it, and not just media as in movies, but, there's a big thought form out there around conspiracies, that sort of thing. So there's a lot that's been going on. And this week I saw something about the movie that came out in 1951 called The Day the Earth Stood Still. It was a classic. I loved it. Loved the movie, although I was only 4 years old at the time. And it's about an alien spacecraft coming to Earth saying that, you know, you have nuclear weapons and we're going to hold you accountable for that in the galaxy. And you're not getting the point. So what they did was they stopped all the energy on the Earth except for hospitals and things like that for some period of time, just to make their point that, you know, there's bigger energies out there. So as you follow this process within yourself, you're going to have a radically different experience than a person would that has no awareness and is just drifting along and finding themselves experiencing these events without a framework to put them in, like Las Vegas, and finding themselves enormously troubled by it. And so therefore questioning everything in their life. Now in 4D, we'll still have identification to some degree with the ego and the personality self, but now we'll have an awareness of our higher self, and we'll also be connected directly to our source through our higher self. And we'll feel it, and we'll know it, and we'll be aware of it all the time. So we're going from a point of separation to a point of direct connection that's continuous. And in 5D, the identification with the soul is as an eternal being. You won't be able to separate yourself from your identification with your soul. You'll know it and you'll live from that place. Now the next one is, does anybody have a comment about that or an experience they want to share?
No, just wondering, we could use those aliens to shut things down for a while because we got the nuclear weapons now. We're them aliens when we need them.
Yeah. I remember shortly after I understood that, by the way, I want to give a lot of credit to Reba, who helped me, inspired me to put this list together. Because I found it to be very powerful, and it inspired me to bring that here today and share it. So on YouTube, I encountered two colonels that were in the Air Force, and they talked about an experience they had in 1960 in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And at one point, and they both said this independently. They both put up YouTubes. They may have talked to each other because they were pretty much simultaneous, but their YouTubes were independent. And they said that a spaceship came down outside their missile silos and completely inactivated all their electronics. And I found that kind of astounding because these are military people, they're colonels. I also found it very interesting that the Canadian Minister of Defense, a very high and responsible position, I would think of it as fairly conservative, in other words, conservative in their beliefs, said that he was brought down to the United States to North Dakota and taken to a base there where he experienced interactions with a number of different aliens. So I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if either one of them are true, but I know that there's a possibility that it's true, and I think that that's going to be part of our future. And in fact, the people that I listen to the channel have some very specific things. For instance, by the end of the transition, by 2030, we will have daily contact with aliens. it won't be long after that that we'll become part of an organization that when Reba told me about the first time, I laughed hysterically, which was the Intergalactic Council. I thought, this is the craziest thing. Well, you can see, I still think it's pretty funny. But you know, all you have to do is watch Star Wars and see the Intergalactic Council. So now it's not as far reach, but I have to admit but now I find that readily believable. And that by 2050, we'll be a significant part of that Intergalactic Council. So, and by the end of the century, we'll be helping other planets with the same transition that we're going through.
Miles, can I tell the story about the Intergalactic Council?
Sure, please.
So, that's when we were first together, and I remember we were,
Turn mine off.
I remember we were putting our bikes up, and that's when Miles, I guess he didn't know how strange I was. And I was talking about the Intergalactic Council, and if there was such a thing, and why wouldn't there be? Because, there's got to be beings that are organized. We're not the only people in the world. And Miles laughed. He said, ah, ha, ha. And I think it was like October. I said, I predict I think it was a few years out or something. Like, I predict like in 2 years or 5 years, you're going to find out that there is such a thing or something like that. So, it was about 2 months later, or maybe even a month, and I'd gone out. I wasn't even there. And Mark Blair, and who's that other guy that moved, that other interesting guy from GTS? Anyway, they came to lunch. And when I came back, Miles was just like babbling. He said, you did it, didn't you? I said, what are you talking about? He said, you told him to, didn't you? I said, what are you talking about? Mark and this guy sat down and proceeded to tell Miles about the Intergalactic Council and all the stuff about it. And he was so freaked out, it wasn't even 2 months. So you're talking about this stuff moving forward from 3D to 4. We laughed. Wasn't it about 2 months?
Yeah, I don't even think it was that.
And I had nothing.
It seems to me it was amazingly fast.
Might have even been a month, but it's all out there in the energy field. And they just, by him saying that, he drew that experience to him. But we laughed so hard about that because I thought it was going to be 2 years or 5 years. It was like a month or something.
Can I ask, where did you get that insight from?
I'm not.
It's around there's a lot of channels that talk about it quite a bit.
Yeah, I used to do some classes about 2012 before it came, and I used to hear a lot of stuff about all of that. This is not something I followed as much, but there was tons and tons of things out there. And I just, it rang true within me, that definitely was true. And so I had known about it for a long time, but of course Miles, he came from a business background, and he had never heard of the Intergalactic Council.
So then he was initiated, and then it was all well.
Did you turn it off?
Yes, I did.
Plus from what my understanding, I heard it from quite a few different sources, is that it's almost like a God decree that there won't actually be any, is this, have I got to put it on?
I just turned it on.
Oh, okay. In my understanding, and I've heard it quite a few different sources, that there was actually sort of a God decree saying that they won't allow any nuclear weapons to be used here because they sort of screw up they go beyond just regular weapons, and they screw up the actual underlying structure of things, and it's really hard to repair. So that they said no, they won't allow it, and the aliens definitely have more than enough technology to do it, just like what you read with the kernels, that they cannot have that happen. So it's not quite as big a deal with little boys playing with nuclear weapons as it's not as bad as it looks. I mean, it is, because we shouldn't even be doing it, but I don't think that they would allow it to actually happen.
Yeah.
No matter what they try, it wouldn't be allowed, and they have the technology to not allow it.
Thank God for the Intergalactic Council.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's called the Galactic Federation.
yeah.
Actually, is the,
Yeah.
is another, there are
Yeah.
several different
Yeah.
terms depending on which level you're at, but.
So, by the way, I think it'll probably take 2 weeks to go through this, because I'm not going to rush. So, we think there's an objective world in 3D, and our thoughts and our stories are real. In fourth density, we become the observer and begin to see our stories and the world as an illusion. And then in 5D, in fifth density, we realize we are the world we are creating. So, I'm reminded of an example. A lady was talking about how she and her partner were traveling across country, and they started having a really wonderful experience, laughing and making jokes, and they just got high as a kite from their interaction. And at that point they stopped, and when they got out of the car, and for about the next 3 hours, everything in her world was completely luminous. It was surrounded by light. It was, somebody out there in the universe agrees with this, right? She said it was one of the peak experiences of her life. And so if you can put yourself in a good enough place, in other words, connect with joy, connect with love, you can make a transition to start to see the world differently. And this has been known to shaman forever. And they would take advantage of using natural substances like peyote or other things like that, or even just experiences. They realized that they could create an experience, and if it was fearful enough, that would literally change the vibrational pattern of the person they were trying to work with, and they could then use that to, for instance, instill beliefs about healing and things like that. And also, if they were effective, the person would change the way they saw the world. They would literally see the world and see the strands of light that connect everything. And that's the model that they had. So has anybody ever had an experience where they started to see the world luminously? Okay. So we think, so this is 3D. We think there is a world that happens to us, and the world is independent of us, and we are victims. In fourth density, we realize we create our own reality. And in fifth density, we realize that every probability exists, and we get to choose the one we live in. So, if you're here today, I'm almost certain that each of you have already had experiences where you experience something, and then down the road, maybe in a day, a week, a month, 10 years, 20 years, you look back and you realized that you created that. You saw it in a different way. Your perception changed, and in the change in your perception, you realized that you were the creator. Even though at the time it seemed like it was happening to you, and you may have even thought you were a victim. Has anybody had an experience like that? Yes, Paul?
Yes, totally. I mean, that's totally.
And that's happened to me, and it's happened to me more and more often. At first, I remember the first time it happened, I was in my 30s. I was around 38, and I looked back on an experience, and I went, oh my God, that wasn't the way it was at all. And then it wasn't, a few months later, I had another experience I looked back on, and I went, oh, At first I thought that was a one-off, but now it happens all the time. I realized that because of the mindset I had, I took that experience and I shoved it into a little box and I interpreted it that way. And later on I realized that either A, the box wasn't there, or B, how I created the box through my beliefs, and that limited the way that I looked at it.
May I comment on that?
Yeah, please. Let me turn this off and give you the mic.
For the sake of the recording.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been my experience that as we begin the journey, if we do recognize an event as being something we wanted, something we were thinking about, even if usually in the beginning we don't even recognize it. It just happens. Now we might recognize it, but then we're going to write it off as coincidence and give it no meaning. And then with more education, more of learning the kind of stuff we're talking about here, and then more and more of those experiences, we get to the point, we meaning me, get to the point where we can't write it off as coincidence anymore. And we have to begin at that point to acknowledge that we created it. And there's tremendous power in that.
Yeah, that's a great example. If you would turn that off.
There we go.
Thank you. The next one. We think we're separate, small, and alone in third density. In fourth density, we have a unity consciousness. And in fifth density, there's no separation. We realize that we're one with all things. So, this is an evolution. And at some point in this class, I'm going to be talking about the 9 inner senses and our ability to connect with other people, animals, plants, trees, rocks, Mother Earth. And so as we experience our life now, you probably have felt very uplifted and a close connection to a baby, to a pet, to a lover, to a child, your child. And the more you experience that, the more you're getting in a connection with this unity. And it goes far deeper. Gardeners know that they have a huge impact on their gardens and on their plants. And some gardeners will talk to their plants and shower love on them. And some people have even done, metaphysical people, have even done experiments and seen dramatic results in the way they treat their plants. And some people have the ability to put themselves in another consciousness. Can you put yourself in the consciousness of a fish, or a dolphin, or a whale, or a wild animal? And that's an example of having a unity consciousness with another consciousness. It's a stretch for us now, but as the energy rises, we'll find that we're more and more open to that, more and more susceptible to that, and it'll just happen naturally, like it happened to me when Reba shared what happened in Las Vegas. I felt an overwhelming and deep sense of compassion for the people that were involved. Next, if we have a religion, we think God is a separate entity outside of us. In fourth density, we know that God is in me and in others. And in fifth density, we realize we're God. So, when I was young, I was in a really stressful situation. Shortly after I got married, we had a baby unplanned. In fact, we were using multiple kinds of contraception, but maybe we were pretty enthusiastic, who knows? But a few months after we got married, we were going to have a baby, did. And then shortly after that, so that took all our savings to finish college, because we had saved up enough money to finish college. That took all our savings to have the baby. And a couple months after that, my deceased wife was diagnosed with cancer. And as we went through that process, it became more and more grave until about 1.5 years in, after multiple operations, chemotherapy, they let us know that she was in stage 4, end stage. Now, she actually survived, and it took quite a few more operations, 3 rounds of chemotherapy, but she made it through. But at the time that I was experiencing that, as I was going through it, I had the Edgar Cayce material to rely on, and I found a wonderful local church. I became a Sunday school teacher there, and I was doing the best I could, working at a job at a steel mill, going to apprenticeship school at night, going to college on the weekends, while my wife was doing the same thing. Even while she was going through chemotherapy, she was doing her student teaching. And each morning I would get down on my knees and in front of a chair and kneel in front of the chair and put my elbows down and pray. And each day, and then one day I'm in the process of praying, and Jesus came down and lifted me up and showed me the whole world. It was a very powerful, transformative experience that let me know that, look, I'm in the arms of all that is. It might seem like I'm going through lots of trials and tribulations, but the fact of the matter is that I was steering a good course. I had a spiritual focus, and with that spiritual focus, I was doing the best I could in my life, and we were being taken care of, and we were being taken care of. My wife managed to get into the most advanced cancer treatment program in the world for the type of cancer that she had. And because it was a research program, it was all free to us. And they even gave us a stipend because we had to go from South Jersey, where we lived, down to Baltimore for the treatments, the surgeries, all that. And they would pay for us to stay at a Holiday Inn. And she got wonderful doctors, and that's the reason she made it. So we were being held. So you can find yourself in very stressful situations like what happened in Las Vegas, and also find that you can make a deep sense of connection to your all that isness, to your spirituality, to the God within. And does anybody else have anything they'd like to share, an experience like that? Okay. So the next one. In third density, we think we have to earn love. In fourth density, just because we are alive, we understand that we deserve love and we're worthy. And in fifth density, we know we are love and worthy, and it's taken for granted, both for ourselves and everyone else. So we go through a lot of techniques, both in church and here, to give people tools so that they love themselves. Because that's always the starting point. Until you start loving yourself, it's hard to have the energy and the love to love others. And once you start that process, it's hard not to. Once you feel that connection. And it's a decision. actually. And you're going to hear that word a lot tonight. So, for instance, you can, in the morning, find yourself loving the world that you're in because you decide that it's your creation and you're going to love it. It takes a little experience, but not a lot. And you will actually find yourself waking up and going out for your walk in the morning and loving the world and embracing it as your creation, and loving the people in it and embracing them as your creation. People that love you unconditionally and have agreed to participate in your reality and follow your script. And what you'll find is, as you do that, your ability to feel compassion will increase dramatically. And it's very powerful. So next, in third density, many of us believe that we're not okay and that we're broken in some way. And we spend a lot of time trying to fix how we're broken. And in addition to that, we have a huge sense, a huge lack of self-worth. We really feel like, well, if people really knew me, they wouldn't like me. Or if they knew the things that I did in my past, they wouldn't want to associate with me. Or, I'm so stupid. How could I have done this or done that? Or, in other words, they're very self-critical. And in fourth density, that changes dramatically. We realize that we don't need to be fixed and that we're perfect the way we are. And the reason is simple. We're eternal. And every instant is just a new stepping point, a new launching pad, a new starting point for the rest of our lives. And we can decide in each instant where we're going to go. So it turns out, in reality, that each point we're at is the perfect place to start the rest of our lives. Our many, many lives, our eternal lives, and this one's included. Bless you.
Bless you.
And in fifth density, we know our perfection in every moment, and it is taken for granted. So, this experience of perfection, again, is frequently a matter of decision. Can you see the perfection in something that's happened? Now, if you're very emotional, it might be quite a challenge. But if you give yourself some space, or if you've trained yourself to be the observer, very often you can connect with your ability to transform the experience that you're in at the moment and see its perfection. And I'll go through a couple techniques that are really quite fun. So let's say you find yourself on the phone talking to somebody and it's not going the way you want. So what I do is I listen to them, but I'm far more focused on the piece of paper I have in front of me. And on that piece of paper, I am not going to stop writing down good things about them until the person on the phone changes. I'm just going to keep, and once you get in touch with the good things about them, that's a vibrational channel, and it'll keep coming to you. And you just keep writing it down, and at some point you will raise your vibration enough that a supervisor will come on the line and say, "Oh, that's a big mistake. I think I know a way we can help you with that." Or you've learned over time that if you ask, "Well, what else is possible?" they'll come up with their own answers. "Well, you know, if you just did this and then did that, this would be easily handled." Voila. So that also works amazingly well with people. Now, we have people in boxes, and we're pretty convinced that they are who we think they are. And the reason they are who we think they are is because we know who they are. But if you start writing down the good things about them, you'll find they change. And you can do this in a short trip. You know, if you're on your way to visit somebody and it's going to take you, say, 20 minutes, and you will solely focus on the good things about them, when you arrive, they will be different. They may be radically different, and they never have to change again. They never have to go back to being the way they were. Now they can if you lose touch with the good things about them. If you change your vibration, you go back to an old vibration, they'll go back to following your vibrational script. But they don't have to. And after I went over that in one meetup, a lady told me a very interesting experience they had where she did the process on the way home, which she said took her exactly 18 minutes. And when she walked through the door, her father was completely different. And that pissed off her family enormously because they all happened to be sitting there. And he was now treating her different than all them. Well, they had all gotten together and figured out who he was, but now she changed and they didn't. So they were seeing the old father and she was seeing the new father. And he never changed for her. She liked that new father so much, she stayed right there. And that's the way she got to experience him. And the rest of her family thought she was full of baloney. And when she told them how easy it was to do that. And would you like to share an experience that you had, Reba, with Will?
Well, I was going to say who Will is.
Yeah.
But I have a friend, and this friend, you can't really count on what he says. And everybody knows that. And I was just like, oh, we were going to spend some time with him. And I was like, oh, I just can't handle this. And so Miles said, you know, do the positive aspects and see him in this way of always telling the truth and being this other way. And I thought, oh yeah, you know, it's never happened. And I did it, and I swear, now, he totally, one time he even said, you know, I don't even know the truth about that. I mean, usually he would have just made up a story. He was totally different. But unfortunately, I held it for that weekend, but I haven't been able to hold it. And so he kind of has gone back. But that was a real miracle. And this, I mean, in my whole life, had he never, ever been that way. I was unbelievable to me. But it totally works, but it's all in your own head. You got to be pretty powerful and pretty definite, you know.
So when you're making your list, don't put anything on the list you waffle about. You know, oh, they're nice in the morning before they have some experience, but after that, no, leave that off the list. You got to find the stuffs that you're solid about, you know, that you're going to be able to hold your vibrational place on.
That's what Wayne Dyer used to say, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yeah.
True.
That's
Yeah.
what.
Yes, yeah. And Wayne Dyer, of course,
Everything.
But
Wayne Dyer was a genius, of course. And when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. You wanted to say something,
well, I
Pierre?
just want to, is it really the perception that changes, or is it actually the person that changes?
So, well,
Person.
so,
But you.
so that's an amazingly deep question.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you brought it up. So every instant, we're all completely new, and there are countless millions of instants every second. So the answer to your question is, they are different. They are new. Every instant, they get a chance to make a choice about whether or not they're going to show up in your life. But if they do show up, it's because, one, they love you unconditionally, and two, They have agreed to follow your script, and that way you always know that you're getting you reflected back to you. So yes, every instant they are completely new, and so are we. We get to make that decision for ourselves as well.
Because we're writing a new script for that person.
Because we're writing a new script for that person, exactly. When we change our vibration, they change.
Right.
So we're in control. We're the all that is that we've been waiting for.
So in the past, I non-verbally gave messages to him that's how I thought he was going to be. And so that was the vibration I was putting out, and he had to match that. But when I changed my vibration and no longer believed that, he could not be that way, because the vibration I was putting out, he had to match. So he actually changed, but it was me that changed.
First.
Yeah. But he actually was different.
Because if he started to do what he was, I don't know this person, but if
Oh,
he
yeah.
started to do what he was doing before, you weren't
Yeah,
playing
thank
into it, so he wouldn't continue it.
Well, but he didn't
But he
even
didn't
go
even
there,
go there.
because my energy was, isn't it Abe that says you have to be within 10%? I think this is pretty, you got to be within 10% of what you want to have. And if you're going to, like, I always talk about, sometimes when people get on the path, sometimes they can't pay their rent, but they want $1 million. Well, they're not within 10%. Why don't they just start with, look, I'm going to pay my rent? They could be within 10% of that. But if you can't be within 10% of what you want, you can't have it. So the 10%, he could not, I was beyond, he couldn't be that old way, because I wasn't within 10% of that. There was no way he could express that. I mean, he didn't even try, which is amazing. Does that make sense? Did I explain that properly?
You did. It's like somebody that's late all the time. You put them in a box, they're always going to be late.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do? When you go to see them, or we say, we know they're going to be late. So what you're doing is just recreating the same
Exactly.
thing
Right.
over
They
and over
have to be
again.
late.
Right.
They
Yeah.
have to
Because
be
you're
late.
creating them that
Because
way.
you're just creating. But if you write a new script and say that person, what could you say? Let's see, that person
Well-
always arrives.
It's possible.
It's
You can say,
possible.
it's possible they might be on time.
Yeah.
That's the other
So-
thing. I think you have to take baby steps. You can't
Yeah.
leave from they're late all the time and today they're going to be 10 minutes early.
Yeah.
That's not 10%.
Yeah.
But it's possible
Yeah.
that today they might be on time. I mean, that's as far as I'd be able to go.
That's a great way to put it, though.
Yeah.
Or put it in the
take-
present. They are on time. Because it's not even, it's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible, it's like in the future,
Yeah.
right? Or, yeah. But I've heard it said you have to put it in the present.
Yeah.
They're on time, period.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you're
it
gonna be
doesn't,
on time.
and you don't have to address the specific issue or incident. In fact, when you're writing your list of positive, rock solid positive things about them, whether or not they're truthful doesn't have to be on the list at all. You're just creating a space in your mind where they can show up differently, because you're focused on the positive. And so, according to the law of attraction, the universe is going to give you an endless stream of confirmation of whatever you believe. So if you start creating a space where you can believe good things and you get in alignment with that vibration, then when you have an interaction with them, they show up reflecting good things, because that's where you're coming from, a place with good things. Well, Paul?
Yeah, so one of the ways that I look at it is, and I actually said this to somebody who freaked out when I said it, there's no one out there.
Yeah.
There's no people out there, there's no buildings out there, your body's not even out there. It's I think you've said the next thing I'm about to say, which is it's all a reflection of your consciousness on the projection of your senses. And so if you're projecting that they are X, they will be X. And if you project that they will be Y, then they will be Y.
Yeah.
Because you create them, as you say, every moment.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to ask,
You guys know?
Yeah.
so let's say that, and of course this has happened, we get out our little book of positive aspects, I'm so angry, it's like, no, I can't think of anything. Let's say Mary Lou can't decide that this person's going to be on time. Let's just say she can't go there. So what to do when you're trying, you want to change your vibration within that 10%, but you just, like, sometimes I just can't make a list of positive aspects because I'm so angry. So what to do?
It's a good question.
It is a good question.
So if you're in a place of deep anger, at that point you have a responsibility to yourself and especially to your body to try and get control of the situation. So you're very well aware, and you use this frequently, hon, get out and do some exercise. Go for a walk. Get out of the environment you're at, your environment you're in, and go do something else. And it really helps if you do something you like. The key is you want to take your mind off of whatever that was. And then, when you can get yourself in a good place. Now, the book, so if you're coming from a neutral place, your positive aspect list is easy. When you're coming from a positive place and you write your list of positive aspects about, say, something you love, you're not even talking about a problem. You're just raising your own vibration because of something that you love. So focusing on the positive things of something that brings you joy. And then when you really seat yourself deep in that place, then start to ask your questions. Now, if you find yourself starting to wobble, well, you're going to need to step back and go more general. But if you can hold that place and maintain your observer position, you can get brilliant insights. And Reba and I both get continuous brilliant insights from our inner dialogues with our guides, with our inner selves, with parts of ourselves that we haven't been happy with in the past, that sort of thing. So a lot is there and available all the time if you can get yourself in a receptive place. And that's why it's not called the law of creation, it's called the law of allowing. So whatever you want is created literally in the instant that you want it. And even if you don't say it or verbalize it or even think it, when you're going through a negative experience, you know what you want. If you're starving, you want food. If you don't have health, you want health. And in that instant, it's actually created and becomes available to you. Now, can you get to a place from suffering? Can you create enough space to get away from the suffering to be able to connect to and then flow the energy that will allow what you want? Well, that's the challenge. Because as Reba said, there's that 10% hurdle. If you can't get within 10%, you're not going to get it. There's not even a chance. That's a hard and fast rule. Now, that might be changing in this time of dramatic increase in energy and transition and transformation. Yes?
I think what you're saying, I've heard it said a little bit differently, and tell me if I'm on the right track here. The Abraham material, they say the worst place to come from is no emotion at all, apathy, because you don't know what you want to change. There's nothing. You're just depressed. That's not possible. But if you can come from a place of anger, they say just that one step up, is better than nothing at all, no motion, because at least you know what you don't want.
Yeah.
So you don't really need to get to the place of the positive for the change to happen, just that one step. Is this the same thing we're talking about?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Thank
how
you.
they
That's a
see it.
great example and very well put. So 1 second, Paul. So I just want to build on that a little bit. So when so the most destructive emotion is self-pity. And the only way you can feel self-pity is if you feel like you're a victim. And the deeper you move into victimhood, where you're at effect, in other words, something else is affecting you, and it's causing whatever situation you're experiencing in your life, the more despondent and depressed you become. And you're not flowing emotion, as you were saying. And when you're not flowing emotion, you're not creating a vibrational pathway into your life for non-physical to bring you good things. Because non-physical is always there, always ready, and always trying to bring you to what you've already created in your, as Abe calls it, your vortex, in your soul. So it's there and available. Paul?
One of the things that I have noticed with the negative emotions is I don't want to suppress them. What I have found the thing for me to do is to embrace them. So if I'm angry, then I'm going to be angry. I'm going to feel angry. I'm going to embrace angry, because when I do that, angry disappears. And what I'm looking for when angry disappears is to find the false belief that was the source of that anger.
That's brilliant, Paul. And that's a pivotal technique in the Seth material. That very technique. I have been remarkably unsuccessful with that. It seems I have almost an infinite capacity to be angry and rageful within myself. I just find myself permanently spiraling down the hole. But I have developed some techniques that I think empower me to make that transition. And one of them is that I'll start asking myself questions so that I can get to a place where I'm not as involved in the anger. So I'll start saying, well, what does this symbolically mean to me? Can I see any good thing about this? And then in the last few months, because Reba's constantly out there trying to find self-improvement opportunities, and I just sort of piggyback on that and really get a lot out of it. I appreciate the work she does, and I get my own benefit, she gets her benefit. And one of the things that I've started to do, like you, is to find that part of myself and then embrace it. Because you always do something with a good intention at the time. No matter how horrific it is, how terrible it is, at the time you're doing something with a good intention. Now, after we have the negative results, then we abandon that part of ourselves. But if we can go back and embrace that part of ourselves and bring it into our lives, say, I love you, I appreciate you. You can even dialogue with that part of yourself and it'll bring you gifts. You can bring that part of yourself up to date. If it was a younger you, say, look, this is where I'm at in my life. Spiritually, I'm in a far different place. And I would appreciate it if you would catch up with me. And then have a conversation. That part of you will give you amazing insights. It will become an ally instead of a burden that you carry around. Because until you make yourself whole, until you heal yourself, that part of you is always going to be out there looking for new ways to get you to recognize it and bring it home, so to speak, into your oneness, into your wholeness. The next one is, in third density, we believe in lack that causes competition, survival anxiety, and self-pity. In fourth density, we know there is an infinite abundance. There is no competition, no anxiety, or self-pity. And in fifth density, we're not having any thoughts at all. We just create what we want and we take it for granted. So, this one can be pretty challenging. And Reba and I found ourselves challenged. So, the question is, how do you create a vision of what you want without feeling a sense of lack when you contrast that to your life and what is? And the answer that I found is, and I'm a long way from being a master of this, let's be crystal clear here.
Master already.
Yeah, there you go. But is to hold it lightly. In other words, hold your vision of what you want lightly. So you can create a vision, you can put as much emotion as you want into the vision about how good it would feel if you were down at the beach with your family enjoying an afternoon, or how good it would feel if you had some experience that you were looking for. But then, after you create that and put the emotion in it, the idea is to just hold it lightly. And I'm reminded of an experience that Reba shared with me where she talked about the fact that she wanted to go to Machu Picchu, and she had a table that was like an altar. And she had a brochure, and after she held that vision, she just slipped the brochure under the altar. And 2 years later, a girlfriend called up and invited her to Machu Picchu. And then, when they got there, she ran into the lady that was in the brochure that she put in the altar.
Oh my God.
And when she told the lady said, "Oh my God, well that's wonderful, why don't you join us?" Which they did for a short period of time. So, she didn't spend a lot of time worrying about it. She didn't spend a lot of time stressing. She just created a vision for herself, felt it, put it in her altar, under the mat for her altar, and bam, she created it. So, if you can find a way to hold things lightly, then you give yourself a chance to allow inner guidance to come through and show up in your life. So the next one. In fourth density, we have negative thoughts.
Third density?
Thank you very much. Third density. Appreciate that, Paul. In third density, we have negative thoughts, and they might even be generalized negative thoughts, and we believe in suffering, and maybe we are actually suffering. In fourth density, we experience periods of great love, deep peace, and expansive freedom, and as we move through this transition, you'll find that those experiences, the amount of time that you're able to sustain those experiences, will expand dramatically. And you'll be able to stay in those states for longer and longer periods of time. And in fifth density, we live in a state of peace, harmony, quiet bliss, and happiness. That's the way it is all the time. So the question is there any contrast in fifth density? Yes, there is. But we wouldn't recognize it because it would seem so small to us. So the question is, can we take a third density experience where we're having negative thoughts and maybe even suffering and find a way to reach for and get into a fourth density experience of love, peace, and freedom? Has anybody ever done that? You have, Paul? Wow. Kudos to you. That's wonderful. And my guess is that people that are involved with NBOC have had those experiences because of their spiritual nature. They've gone through something and started to rely on their inner spirit, surrendered themselves, surrendered it to their inner spirit, and the next thing you know, it was showing up in a very positive way. Now, I skipped the break tonight because
That's why I have to pee.
yeah, sorry about that. So we only have 10 minutes left, so I'm just going to plow on for a couple more minutes and then throw it open to questions, and then we'll wrap it up, and you'll be able to take a bathroom break. So, in third density, happiness depends on something outside of us. In fourth density, we understand that happiness is an inside job. And in fifth density, the state of being does not depend on any outer circumstance, and we live in a state of happiness. So, anytime that we feel like, oh, if this person will just do that, or if this situation would just change, the situation that we construe to be outside of us, then I'll be happy. The real experience is, because we don't have any power there, that when we find that experience, the happiness is short-lived, because then something else is going to happen. Happiness only comes when you claim your power, when you claim your ability to make a decision. And so one time Goldie Hawn was being interviewed by Oprah. And Oprah said, well, Goldie, you're always happy. And Goldie said, that's because long ago I decided to be happy.
Right.
And so ever since then I've been happy. It's a decision. Some people know it and realize it and understand it and are able to create that in their lives. But until you take ownership and say, I'm going to be happy and I'm going to find a way, and once you drive that stake in the ground, because when the universe is recreating the earth every instant, it reorganizes the whole universe with you at the center. It will deliver whatever it is you need to sustain that happiness. Once you've achieved that vibrational state, you're the winner, you're in charge. And the more you hold that, the more you hold the intention for that, the more you hold that vibrational place, the more you're in charge. And the universe will always send you a continuous stream of confirmation of whatever your vibrational state is, which is always based on your beliefs. And so when you're happy, the universe is going to deliver happy to you. Always third density. We're always waiting for happiness tomorrow. Fourth density. We know happiness is a decision and it is our choice. And fifth density, we live in happiness now, no waiting for anything, including happiness to happen. So the example that I just gave is a good example of of that in effect. The key here is, are you waiting for tomorrow? So it's not maybe just waiting for another person. Are you waiting for circumstances to change around and come into alignment with what you want? And the next one, and this is where we're going to end it, no awareness of the present moment. So that's in third density. It doesn't seem like, what are you talking about, present moment? What in the heck is a present moment? And of course, it's being here now with whatever your physical circumstances are. In fourth density, we are aware of the now and we are aware of the present moment. And in fifth density, we only live in the present moment. That's the only place you can exist in fifth density. So, this is quite shocking. And this is from our beloved Eckhart Tolle. It is literally impossible to be unhappy in the present moment. You can't do it. And the reason is simple. In the present moment, there's no past and no future, and you can't be unhappy unless you can compare to things. But when you're here now, sensing the beauty of people, sensing the beauty of this place, just being open to being able to breathe, the light, maybe the art, when you're in the moment, you've taken yourself out of duality, out of this comparative world that is required, is a necessity in order to create a sense of unease, discomfort, and lack that is required to feel upset, that is required to feel bad. So Eckhart wrote his book, The Power of Now and the New Earth, and his genius just continues to flow into this world. Kath?
Yeah, I was going to say, I often say to people that I want to be as happy as my dog, because he's happy all the time. And it's like,
Yeah.
and it's true, because he's in the moment all the time. He isn't worrying about whether he got dinner yesterday or whether he's going to get it tomorrow. He's always happy and excited in the moment, because that's all he's got.
Yeah.
So it's true, yeah.
That's-
When you said that, I go,
I take
well, yeah, he's
exception to
exactly
that.
like that, because he doesn't have any of the other stuff.
My dog is keenly aware of the future. Keenly aware of the future, and her fears are based on the past. So,
How do you know this?
if I'm about to do something that's going to cause her
Give me a
pain,
second,
like
let me turn
cut her
this on.
nails,
Okay.
right? She will anticipate that fear. She'll anticipate that pain and react accordingly. So she has a fear. It's based on the past, and she definitely fears for the future.
Interesting.
So most present moments, if we're fully present, things are fine. I mean, we're sitting here, everything is fine. We can make up something. But what about the present moment when you get some bad news? Maybe you get bad news about your family or something, an investment or some stuff like that. So what happens when you get the present moment where something you aren't happy?
So, let's go to the dog.
I want to hear the answer.
So,
Something I do many times.
I'm going to draw a comparison between the dog and Las Vegas. So, people tend to blame the government. And people will say that For instance, the dog has its own perceptions. But the dog, the leaf, the branch, the tree, and every person in your life are just following your script. So the dog and the government are both reflections of us. We tend to draw lines and say, well, that's not us. We didn't create that. But unfortunately, as all that is, you're going to have to start to open up your arms and embrace it all. And the government is what we make it. The government is what we believe it to be, but in a more profound sense. We have a responsibility to be the government we want the government to be. What did Gandhi say? Be the change you want to see. So when we start acting that way, now what I'm going to say next is breathtakingly deep. All realities already exist complete. So when you make that transition, you each instant are taking a small quantum leap in the direction of that reality that already exists. And that's why it's not a matter of creating it, it's a matter of allowing it. Because all that is everything. So we don't doubt that. What exists apart from all that is? Nothing that I can think of. So, if you can be the change inside yourself, you are literally providing the rocket fuel, especially when you combine that with emotion, to take larger and larger quantum leaps to the world that you want to experience, including the government.
So the dog, I'm sorry, so I'm just trying to make the analogy with the dog. So the dog really isn't reacting to the past stuff, it's reacting to his energy, is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
His expectation.
Yeah, it's always the same. Every part of our reality, whether it's the government, the dog, the person you're living with, the trees in your yard, it's all talking to you. And it's all reflecting you back to you.
I mean, just to be clear, there's no dog.
Yeah, there you go. It's all illusion, yeah.
It's an illusion. There's no dog.
But
You're writing the script for the
You're
dog
right.
too.
Precisely, I created the dog and the dog's behavior and all of it.
I didn't tie that up. Could you do that, please?
Sure. So, Reba does this all the time. That's a question that's so deep. I'm going to start next week answering that.
I thought that in my mind though, what if you got a diagnosis
Yeah.
in that moment?
You're not happy.
You're not happy. I thought the exact same thing when you were
Yeah.
saying, in this moment, right, this moment we are happy. Because there's nothing,
Yeah,
we're not getting bad news about anything, our
Yeah.
children, ourselves, or anything. But in that moment, when somebody tells you that you have something,
So the way this is, and Abe and Seth have a great sense of humor, and this is the way they put it. So you're in a plane at 40,000 feet, and you jump out, and now you're trying to figure out how you're going to change your thoughts so that you have a good landing. The way they explain it is, you didn't get here with one thought. You got here with a long progression of thoughts and beliefs and growing emotion that finally found expression in your physical reality. Nevertheless, you are not bound by that, just like we are not bound by karma. You can literally change your destiny in less than a minute if you could hold that focus. And what will happen is, and this is a little further in that I'll be covering next week, but what will happen is you will recreate your past now, in your now, to support the new present and the future where you're, for instance, healed. But you will create it now.
Right now.
And the example I always use is you have a situation that you're trying to affect, and you go out into the mailbox and there's a letter sent by somebody that seems like it was sent weeks ago or days ago or months ago, and it has a solution to a problem that you have now. And it's because you created that vibrational pathway for that to show up in your life now that provided the solution that you're looking for. You created your past now.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And, you know, it's something that was totally unexpected. Here's a check for $1,200 because the old dorm furniture that we bought from Goodwill turned out to be antiques, and I couldn't track you down, so I'm sending you this check for $1,200, and it turns out that that's the exact amount of money you need for your cruise.
That explains why when you, I mean, everybody's had this experience, I'm sure, the divination, when you're looking for an answer, I open a book and there it is. Or I put on a tape and there it
Yes.
is. It's the same principle,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
There it is.
Yeah.
And as you keep saying, there is no past and there is no future. Eckerd talked about that, right? There's no past. So what you created in the now was an event that your mind explained off as all the reasons in the past. One of the things that I really love, and I told Mary Lou about this a long time ago, there's a video on YouTube about quantum physics, quantum theory, quantum mechanics, and all of that. And they actually show the experiments that were done with electron, yeah, I guess it's electrons. They take two electrons that are entangled, so they're supposed to be the same thing. And depending upon whether you're observing the experiment or not observing the experiment, the electrons create either a wave pattern on a target or a particle pattern on a target. And it changes based on the fact that you're observing it or not. So you change the past, because what you see in the now is the pattern of what occurred to the particles in the past. And so you actually create the past in the now. Anyway.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
and it's all on video. It's all
Yeah,
on YouTube.
yeah. Yeah, I love quantum mechanics because it's such a huge supporter of. But Seth really cautions about that because we're kind of limited in the way we view quantum mechanics in that we view it from the official line of consciousness. And we're all constantly trying to squeeze it into that box. And quantum mechanics, just like so much in our world, is multidimensional. But a lot of the things are breathtakingly close parallels, yes. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Well, just as an example, when Mary Lou and Reba were talking about how do you handle things and how it results. Just for an example, last week we were hacked, our server. So you would think, I would freak out and think, oh my God, they want ransom actually, it's called ransomware now, where they actually want you to pay to get your data back. So, but it was so cool because I just calmly called my database guy and, he's like, let me look into it, and it took, 24 hours or so. But long story short, because of the fact that I religiously back up, we had all the backups so we didn't have to pay to get it unlocked. And I just stayed calm the whole time because I already constantly put out there every day that everything is fine, everything is well. I mean, this has happened to us before, not the exact same thing, but just using that again as an example. And my assistant basically blew up our database, and she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, because we have tens of thousands of people in our database. It's not like you can easily just put it back. And I said, I'm just going to go away for a while. So I went and prayed. Because I wasn't near as faithful back then, whatever you want to call it, 10 years ago. But I came back, and again, the guy that was dealing with us, he's like, I don't know how, but we got it back. He says, because I've never seen it be able to come back, what she did. And so sometimes I think it's, again, what you said, if you constantly just walk in faith, knowing all is well, all is working out for the best good, instead of freaking out all the time, because I used to be one that would freak out a lot, trust me. So it's not like I don't know what it's like to freak out, but I just chose to, like you said earlier about Goldie Hawn, you just choose to be happy, you choose to be loving, you choose, and I feel like all those things, when you choose that on a regular basis, when something like that happens, it keeps you centered.
And it has unspeakable benefits, the most important of which in my mind is your body.
Right.
Because your body is not aware of what's outside of you physically. You
Right.
might think that it is because you're so aware, but it's not. The only thing your body is aware of is your inner dialogue, your inner message. And when you're peaceful, and when you are optimistic and have faith, it gives your body a wonderful environment in which to take care of itself.
Yes.
And it can take care of itself if we don't feed it a constant stream of threat and anxiety, and which dramatically reduces its ability to do its job because it's trying to respond to something that it doesn't understand.
It's so true, and like when you guys were talking earlier about how you perceive people and you really project what they're going to be, that just happened to me also just recently. Long story short, I usually do these affiliates where we agree to do something, they agree to do something. I call it a win-win-win because it's usually at least three
Oh, I
different
love
people
that, yeah.
that are involved. Well, I had one that I did in May, and I kind of let it fall to the wayside because I got to admit, I was thinking it was one-sided, that I get to do it all and they don't do anything. So, but I was nudged to call them up again last week. This is a huge corporation. I mean, this is a massive finance company that we were doing business together. Anyway, the point is, when I opened myself up, I just kept asking myself beforehand, you know, to just go in there with love and just see what we can do together. So I did, and anyway, so I wound up creating all these, you know, marketing campaigns and stuff for them and how we could work together. Today they called me and they said, you know, we decided to change your agreement. I said, oh, you did? Could you know, 'cause it's really like a 13-page document, all the legalese. I thought, oh, here, I gotta read it again. I said, can you just tell me the differences so I don't have to pay somebody to read it again, because you never know what it really says. Anyway, he says, well, we just, you know, decided to give you, instead of 2% commission, to give you 10%. And like, and just see, just because I was open to being okay with, you know, being the one that would lead, and that, you know, so if something comes out of it, okay, but I had already agreed to be part of this partnership. I need to do my part.
Right.
And instead of, like I was in May, thinking, oh, I did this and now they're not going to do nothing, you know? So it really, what you guys are all saying is so true.
That's beautiful. And you saved the $10,000 you would have paid the lawyer to review the agreement, right?
Right.
Only to tell you, well, they went from 2% to 10%, right? So that's beautiful. Wow. Thank you. I can't think of a better note to end on. Well, thank you all very much. I really appreciate your coming.